Hello everyone, this is Charlotte and this is a podcast called Chatting in Cars. It's where I talk about random topics while I drive and hopefully not run people over. I'm currently driving home from work, which is about a 45-minute drive. It's one of those long ones. Hopefully I don't hit a kid on a bike because they just run at the damn cars. Now, I'm a teacher. There's a disclaimer at the start of this podcast because I talk about sensitive topics and I also swear profusely. Especially considering my days filled with not being able to even say the words shut up because kids find it offensive even though they tell each other to shut up, which is weird. I will be swearing for the next 45 minutes a lot. I think that kid is just getting stomped. What are you doing? Anywho. Oh, come on. Yeah, and kids ride out too apparently. So the topic for they keep you on your toes. Anyway, the topic for the drive home today is band-aid solutions. Now, this is actually a term that my ex-husband coined while we were together. So I'm going to give him credit for that. Band-aid solutions are basically self-medication. It's whatever we do to get by, to make these horrible situations that we face repetitively as adults somewhat more tolerable. Some of them are innocent, some of them are not so innocent. These are also things that we deal with trauma responses as well. These are band-aid solutions which don't actually fix the core problem, but seek to ease the pain, essentially. We're all guilty of it, really, aren't we? I mean, no one's actually going to have this fucking problem and then suddenly come up with a solution straight away. No one logically thinks that. And a lot of people are sitting on emotions and things like that. So the logic side of things that comes with fixing a problem when it arises generally gets pushed to the back burner because everybody's sort of in survival mode. I mean, I don't think there is one person on this planet that can have something horrible like rape or murder or something done to them. Murder done to them would be fine, yeah. And just instantly come up with a logical response of how to deal with the trauma and fallout. As much as we are told that we should be stoic or logical about parts of our lives, we're humans, we're emotion-based creatures. A lot of our responses are going to be based on, the basic emotional responses that you would get in a primate, essentially, Or whether it was anger or depression or love or we're riding out emotions all the time. So none of us really have any kind of real grasp of how to actually deal with these situations without getting some kind of emotional involvement in there. A lot of these people deal with these emotions by either shutting them down and internalizing them, which is insane, should never do that, or medicating them. A lot of toxic masculinity is to shut down emotions and to internalize them. I'm going to say you can't really put that under toxic masculinity because I was actually raised that way myself. My mum just called that adulting. So you got a problem. One of their favorite sayings growing up was, "Don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about," and they fucking did. There was a lot of not addressing your emotions and things like that, which is why all of my siblings and I have some kind of eating disorder, because instead of addressing our emotional needs, if you want to go into sort of Freudian needs sort of things, the emotional side of things, by his theory, is met with oral fixation. So all of us have eating disorders. If you want to Google that. He looks at different things. It's like he goes into like the oral needs, the sexual needs, I think it's the physical needs. I'm going to have to look into it a bit more because I'm a bit rusty on Freud. But he goes into sort of psychoanalysis of, where people's issues come from, their trauma. Most of it's related somehow to a mother or father wound sort of thing. And he talks about how our psychological needs, if there is a gap in our in our development, it's often met with some kind of particular response we've developed. So if you've got like an oral fixation, I've got an oral fixation because I'm ASD. I know that much. I also know that the environment in which I grew up in medicates a lot with things like food, which is why we're all either obese, or if you've got ASD like I do, you've got a comorbidity of anorexia or an eating disorder that way. All my siblings are quite large because they medicate their issues with food. If anything goes wrong, they stress eat, or they depression eat, or if they're happy, they celebrate eat, which is why they're all classified as obese, technically. The only reason I didn't go that way was, well, there are several reasons I didn't go that way. Firstly, in ASD, I got a predisposition for eating disorders the opposite way. I developed anorexia. That was my band-aid solution to dealing with the stress of growing up in a household with my parents, and that started at 16 and ran through my life till late 20s. I didn't really cope with a lot of stressful situations well. I just stopped eating. It's the only thing I seemed to have control over. It also became addictive because I felt I was making progress in my life in that way. If you've listened to my anorexia podcast, you'll know what kind of shit I went through. It was a band-aid solution. It didn't fix the core problem that I had no control and I wasn't happy. Ooh, yeah, nice bike, dumb fucker driving it. Sorry, did you hear that one? It was a nice one, didn't it? I don't know what that was, he went too fast. Anyway, this is a nice bike from a distance. But my anorexia was something I had control over, and it was also a means to, garner some form of attention, some kind of validation. You could blame mass media to an extent where girls need to be skinny. At the time we had skinny girls again. What was it, heroin chic we had again. But it's not like I was saturated by that shit because we didn't have phones or social media. We had magazines, that's about it. And my parents didn't allow me to have magazines or anything like that. So everything I knew as an eating disorder came from experience. It wasn't a case of mass media told me to be skinny, therefore I value, therefore I'm anorexic. It was more a case of I looked around me, I knew I was fat at the time, and I was fat because I used to steal food. I got fat just out of necessity. So to counteract it, I swung completely the other way, developed an eating disorder where I wouldn't eat anything, and me being quite the stubborn person stuck with it for quite a while, and I essentially just wasted away. I was skeletal. If you look at my Year 12 ball photos, I look like I'm dying. I look like something that's crawled out of Auschwitz. I could see my back ribs through my shirts and things like that. I could see my spine. I was not well. My brain was addled. It's a whole big story. If you go listen to the anorexia podcast, it'll pretty much fill you in with how it went. But that was my band-aid solution to not having any control, and so I took control of what I could, and it turned out it was my starvation. Not healthy, of course, and it created more health problems than it solved. I lost weight, yes, but I also lost my fucking mind and my body and my health, and everything went downstairs, and I nearly lost out on getting into uni and things like that because I just didn't have the concentration. I didn't have anything to keep going. I skimmed into uni. I went in on a general arts degree. I got in, but it weren't great. Yeah, it's not a good thing. But my family uses food as band-aid solution, so if we're stressed, not so much me now. I do find that I do get bored and I eat, or if I'm coming up to a period, I eat excessively, more than I usually do. But I've got to be careful that if I'm too stressed, I go the other way, I starve. And I did do that when I was separated from my ex-husband. I found that my food intake was dropping away again, and I was getting too stressed, and I was depressed, and I wasn't eating. So I mindfully made sure I was eating. I really had to put the effort in with that because everything was falling apart. So that was my job, to keep my health in line when he decided to fuck off. So that was one of my jobs. After that, I decided I don't want to use Band-Aid solutions to fix things. I want to make sure I look at the core components of the issue and what's creating the problems themselves, because the Band-Aid solution is just there to cover up stuff. They don't actually fix the problem. The problem never goes away. You just find ways of dealing with it. I'd rather actually deal with the core problem so I don't have to keep thinking of ways to keep myself entertained or happy or on track or surviving. Lots of people drink. In 2008, I started drinking. That was when I broke up with my now ex-husband the first time. This was also the first time I had slept with my now ex-boyfriend, funny enough. It was that year of complete destruction where I'd miscarried for the second time. I lost my ex-boyfriend, well, my ex-husband. I was just letting shit go, and I wasn't thinking. And the way I coped with the miscarriage and losing my now ex-husband, we got back together afterwards, but it was, it's fucked up, was to go and get drunk, essentially. And it wasn't good for me because I ended up sleeping with my now ex-boyfriend, who is, if you've listened to the other podcast, you'll know what kind of a person he was, and he hasn't changed since, to be honest. In fact, he might have got worse. So Band-Aid solutions, again, it didn't make me feel any better. I felt worse because now I was I slept with someone that I didn't really know, to try and make myself feel better. I was drinking, my body was breaking down. I was just coping. I was trying to numb it with drink. I'm not saying I turned alcoholic, but if there was a party going, I was going. I wasn't drinking at home, but it was about as destructive as I got, and it only lasted for about 6 months or so. I'm the worst person for being destructive. You get these people that spiral into these drug abysses and things like that. These days, I just get a sugar fix. But again, Band-Aid solutions. I've never managed to Band-Aid with drugs or anything like that. I'm happy and I'm grateful that I never went that way. I've never used drugs. Never. It never appealed to me. In my head, it always made me think, like, if you're taking drugs, you're just making a situation 10 times worse. So that wasn't really a Band-Aid solution for me. Lots of people will use that, hoping that it gives them some form of escapism. Same as like sleeping around and sex. Kind of, if you feel a bit unworthy, or if you've got nothing to live for, if someone's willing to fuck you, then obviously you have value. It's like, do you though? Because if they discard you at the end, which they inevitably will, you're back at square one. It didn't fix the problem. You haven't got any kind of self-worth. Because it's all fleeting, temporary attention. As I said in the show pony side of things, in podcast. Because it's not a thing that we fix things with. You can't fix things with sex. It's like people that have shitty marriages and then try and have another kid to try and plaster over it and hope it fixes it. Because for a while it will help you bond with that one kid, but when the kid grows up or loses the cute stage, you've now got an extra kid to have to deal with that you didn't want in the first place particularly. And you're still stuck with the same asshole in the relationship that you were trying to get rid of. It didn't fix the relationship. It rarely does, I think. The people who give you the shits are still going to be the same people that give you the shits. Now you've just got an extra kid on top. It's absurd. People who smoke, like when they're stressed, and then they smoke more. It's like, it's not going to help you. Come on. It's just going to fuck your lungs up more. It's going to kill your vessel more. These are not things to do. I would rather I just got to the point where I would rather try and find as many Band-Aid solutions as I can that I'm actually doing and see if I can find ways of eradicating them. I'd rather just take on the core problems at this point. I used to just sort of medicate with food, like when I was teaching, so this is past anorexia, so I went the other way. I started eating a lot. 2014, I think, was when I was really starting to eat, just to comfort myself, because I was in a shitty marriage. And I was working every day trying to support someone who didn't love me, didn't appreciate what I was doing for them, so I was eating. I would go to like the IJ, which is just it's a shop, it's a Woolworths, but like smaller, on the way to work, and I'd load up on a shitload of cakes and things. And I'd eat them on the way to work, and I'd eat them for recess, and it would be all unhealthy stuff, and I'd feel like shit afterwards. And it didn't fix the relationship, it didn't fix the fact that he was an asshole. This was when I was married, and it didn't stop the stress, but it was that momentary niceness in an entire environment where I was highly stressed and unappreciated, and I didn't feel, wanted or validated, or all the basic needs of wanting to belong to something. My kids were driving me up the fucking nuts. I had year twos at the time, and I can only imagine how much that would be worse if it was an older year group. And I started putting on weight then. And of course that actually compounded on the relationship with my ex-husband, because he didn't find me attractive, to be honest. In general, I don't think. But it made it worse because I was getting squidgy. And he would start trying to, boss me around, because he was a personal trainer. And a vain prick to boot, so, while I'm sitting there trying to compensate for these demands he's placing on me, he's sitting there saying things like, why aren't you working enough? Why aren't we doing this with our lives, sort of things. He had all these demands he wanted to do with our lives, but he never actually wanted to contribute properly to them. He wanted holidays, he wanted to go out drinking and pubbing and shit like that. All these big ideas, but he never actually wanted to work for me. He wanted me to do it. He'd get pissy that I wasn't working enough. I remember having a big blow up at one point because he said I wasn't working enough. I was relief at the time. I was working every day, but the pay rate for a relief teacher is not the same as a full-time teacher. We're considered casuals even though we're working the same hours. So he cracked the shits. He said, you have to go and get a full-time job. And I go, what are you talking about? I'm paying the majority of this anyway. And I was already stressed up to the eyeballs because it is a stressful job even as a relief teacher, and he just didn't have the capacity to see outside of his own asshole that I was, dying, essentially, and I was medicating myself with food. Rather than say, I'm concerned for your health and stuff like that, he started demanding I go to the gym with him and train with him and stuff like that, and it turned me off going to the gym. Later I would find out that I actually quite love the gym. I do, except I don't love what he was telling me I had to do. I have my own groove now. I like doing my own things. I'm very comfortable in the gym now. Before I was doing it to keep him happy or to keep him off my back. But at the same time I was still eating shit to try and make myself feel better. I didn't have any kind of internal validation. I was using external validation heavily, just to get by in survival mode, deal with stress. Now I actually face the problem. I know that I've still got a residual sugar addiction, and it is addiction. It's easy to get me snowballing into binge eating again, especially if you've got like junk food sitting around. This is why I get anal about avoiding morning teas, teacher morning teas and shit like that, because it's like watching pigs at a trough, in a horrible way. They lay up these massive tables, and all the teachers I know are quite large, and they just circulate around this table like pigs at a trough. And I sat there and I looked at this, and it turns me off it now, because I'm sitting there thinking I don't want to be like that, and I don't want to use food to medicate my stress. So what do I do instead? I go and do yoga, I go to the gym, I try and find ways, I go for a walk, I listen to music. I know I've already got predisposition for sugar addiction, so now I'm using non-sugar alternatives in foods and things like that, because I know if I go full sugar, it's gonna trigger me into a snowball where I'll just eat shit for a week and to compensate for the stress levels, and I'm not gonna feel good, and I'll spiral into depression. and it will just be, and it'll be gone. It takes me 3 days to get over sugar. I've measured it time and time again. And once you get over 3 days, your body feels a bit better, and you feel a bit cleaner and less gluggy, and you know, it's breakable by that stage. By the end of the week, if you've managed to avoid it, you can keep going without it, as far as I can see. But that's me. The Band-Aid solutions aren't helping. I know people that have got binge eating disorders probably have a harder battle. My brother, for example, cannot diet to save his life. He's going to have real trouble when he gets older, because he's 43 now? Something like that, 43. I think it's 43, because he was born in 1980. And he's stress eating. His wife is passive-aggressive bitch, essentially, and he eats to compensate for her nagging him. He won't or cannot recognize that he is in a toxic relationship environment. He, like me, is a maintainer and a people pleaser, and he will keep allowing this bitch to rough ride him just to say he has someone, and he is afraid of being alone. So he keeps taking the emotional, psychological beating. He compensates with food. He hides the evidence. I know he does, because he does this at my house. If we go out somewhere and he's eaten something he shouldn't have, he'll hide the wrappers. He'll give me a bag of McDonald's wrappers and shit, and I haven't set foot in a McDonald's in fucking yards. But he'll hand me the bag of rubbish and say, can you hide that? Or get rid of that. And I might be enabling, but I know what the fuck he's going on with at home. And I feel sorry for him. I'm going, you've got to grow some balls, man, and either leave the situation or tell her to fuck off. Because she is killing you inadvertently. But then again, I have to accept that it's his actions that he band-aids these issues with food. It could be worse. He could be taking drugs. He could be heavily drinking. He could be doing all kinds of things, none of which would actually be constructive. And even this in its innocence is still not constructive. He's still going to get diabetes and heart issues and things like that. He's trying to do CrossFit at the moment, and I'm terrified. To be honest, he's going to have a heart attack. He drinks energy drinks. Again, Band-Aid solutions to the sluggish result of eating crap. He's setting himself up for a fall. And I worry about it, to be honest, because he's my brother, and I love my brother, so I can't figure out how I'm gonna voice it to him. He doesn't get defensive, but I know it's just gonna affect him more emotionally in a negative way, because, even if I point it out, it'll hurt his feelings. So I still don't know how to deal with that. I lead by example, to be honest. I'm going, do you see me doing it? No, then you probably shouldn't be doing it yourself. But again, I still have habits. I still have downsides, down days. The hard part is actually finding the core problem, because it does require some kind of introspection. A lot of our issues, I should say, my issues in particular, come from deep-seated shit from childhood. Obviously, the first 20 years of my formative life were abusive. That's a no-brainer. You've got some people saying, I can't do that because I've had a fucked up childhood. It's like, I acknowledge I had a fucked up childhood, and I'm trying to stop it affecting my adulthood, because I don't want to be like my parents. My parents also have eating issues. They're both obese. They eat their anger. I don't know if they eat their frustration. They've lived in a poverty cycle of their own making, obviously. Rather than fix the poverty cycle, they just ate their way through it. So, it's like, it's that immediate gratification, the lack of maturity to see that there should be some kind of long-term goal here instead of just looking for that immediate fix. I don't know whether they lack maturity, or they lack strength to persist, or clarity to figure out how this could actually be detrimental to their health in the long term by looking for that instant fix now. They just don't have any sense of foresight and just, or the no resilience. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out myself, because for some reason I came out different. I don't know why. But then again, I had the role model, the anti-role models to tell me that, you know, this is what happens when you do this, so I'm not going to do it. And my choice kicked in and I said, no, I'm not doing that. So there is an element of choice with your Band-Aid solutions. Ideally, what you want to do is find a way that's more sustainable when dealing with shit that goes wrong. You know, some people lose their job or something like that and they just sink. And they start drinking, or they just, you know, use up their savings, and they take on that fuck it mentality. Everything's already going wrong, I might as well just throw the rest of it in. And they don't think, well, okay, what can I salvage from this? Like when I separated from my ex-husband, I was adamant that I wasn't going to just spiral. I noticed, obviously, my first thing that went was my food. My money was fucked. It was already pre-fucked, to be honest, because I was already trying to carry us both. We had no savings. I left with the shirt on my back, so again, I had no backup. And when I finally got the apartment back, I had to renovate that, and he didn't pay for anything. So, because, I don't know, whether he wanted to or he couldn't, I don't know. So that all went on my credit card. But, you know, as far as the spiraling went, and the Band-Aid solutions, me taking that trip when I was already in credit card debt was probably the worst Band-Aid solution I did do. But at the time I was not mentally stable or emotionally stable, so I thought, fuck it, and I threw the rest in. You know, everything's going to be torched and burnt, I might as well throw the rest in and see what happens. We'll fix it when we get out. I took a me day. I took a me trip to try and compensate for the big crazy shit that was going down, because the alternative was to stay and try and deal when I just wasn't there emotionally or psychologically enough to deal with the fallout of what was happening. You know, as I said, I had to go to a psych and stuff like that just to fucking sleep, or just to stop crying, because I couldn't stop crying. It was really weird. It was just, and it was spontaneous as well. Later, I was diagnosed with depression. I didn't realize it at the time. That's one of the downsides of autism, is like I didn't realize that it was depression until someone actually, as a third party, turned around and said, well, you're doing all this. These are the hallmarks of depression. You have got depression. And you go, no, I just can't stop crying. And you crawl out of your little swamp life and you try and find the cause of it. I mean, luckily the cause of my depression was pretty fucking obvious. My life was falling apart. But some people just live in the circumstances of their life falling apart without stopping to look and see what's causing it. Is it self-sabotage? Is it, you know, the people you've surrounded yourself by? Is it the job you've decided to stay in because you can't or you won't leave? There's a lot of things, and people just don't like recognize that stressful shit is going to fuck you up. The Band-Aid solutions, you're looking to medicate these circumstances, fuck you up even further. When I was sitting my doctorate, I was getting too stressed, because this was the lead up. This was when I was having the arguments with my ex-husband. I wouldn't say so much arguments. It was more like him telling me that we're doing stuff and me not wanting to, but, you know, trying to avoid the breakup altogether. And that went on for like a month before the final ultimatum. But my supervisor, who didn't understand that I was having marriage issues at the time, and just said, why don't you just take antidepressants? Just while you're doing this, just take antidepressants. I was thinking, I don't want to medicate. Obviously, I'm going through a tough time right now. These are real life experiences. I would rather feel them than hide from them. I'm all about sort of behavioral exposure rather than just medicating. I'd rather change my behaviors than just cover it up with chemicals. But her solution was just, fuck it, take the tablets. And it's a quick fix, but I wouldn't have felt anything. I wouldn't have felt any kind of healing as well. I would have just been in a numb state, just getting by. And in order to heal these kinds of things, you do actually need to feel the pain. And people don't want to feel the pain. They just want to medicate. They just want to get by or survive. In order to treat the core wounds, you're going to have to face that some shit went down. Maybe you weren't ready for it, maybe you weren't prepared for it, and some people are just genuinely fucking cruel. This person that I had loved for 16 years of my life, over half my life, had decided to be a cruel piece of shit. Out of nowhere, it seems. And then you start reassessing the circumstances like, well, it was not really out of nowhere. He already had the predisposition to do these kinds of things. He was cruel to his brother. He was an asshole to his grandma, his mum. There's always some kind of nasty comment, snide comment. I just missed because it's like, oh, it's just he doesn't have a great relationship with them. But then I should have predicted that it would come back on me because at some point I'm not going to be in the favor of this narcissistic prick. I didn't register that at the time. I thought I was safe as houses. So realistically, it didn't come out of the blue. I should have seen it coming. But I didn't want to believe it. And looking back at all the comments and the nastiness that outweighed all the nice things that we ever did together. You know, I was medicating with things like food or trips or burying myself in my businesses at the time. I was running businesses as well as working full-time, trying to keep us afloat. And I allowed myself to be busy enough to just ignore the red flags, which is not good for my health because it just stressed me out more. And I was still stuck with an ungrateful asshole who didn't appreciate my efforts in the slightest. He was not a good guy. He was a bit covert. It was an overt narc by the end of it. But while he was with me, he was a bit covert. I suppose he didn't want to lose the one that was in the home, so he, you know, he had the one in the home and the one in the streets kind of mentality. So if he'd fucked that, he would have been out. And I think he knew that. Whether he would have admitted it or not, I don't know. But these days I find medicating things with food or work or, you know, sleep or... they don't fix the problem, you're still stuck with the problem. So what we need to do is start actually changing the circumstances that leads to the stress and the horrible experiences. Change them for the better and find more tolerable ways of dealing with the stress and the fallout of these horrible experiences, basically. I mean, I've gone through a lot of things as a result of my trauma. Eating disorders, falling into relationships of codependency, trichotillomania, or I sit there and hack at my skin, and it's just not nice. I know it's not nice, and he used to give me shit for it. Little did he realize, I doubt, you know, that he was actually causing it inadvertently because he was stressing me the fuck out, or at least contributing to it. It's just these horrible experiences. What I should have done is just left him. And I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to do it because I felt like the loss would have been greater than, you know, the sitting with the person who was causing the pain. And I've not got a good handle on change because I crave stability. And I crave stability because the first 20 years of my life were abusive and traumatic. And I'm trying to find my feet even now, and I still have those moments where it's like the silence. If you go and listen to the podcast I did of the value of silence, I still find that unnerving, the silence, but I know it's temporary, and I know it changes, and it'll go away soon. So I try and sit in it and figure out why I'm thinking or feeling empty and hollow and sitting in the cold, and I try and figure out why this is a problem right now. It's become very much internally like an analysis process. Why am I getting triggered by this? how would I feel if an alternative scenario would occur. For example, like last night I was sitting there and I did feel a bit lonely. I'm not used to living on my own. I lived in a family of 6 growing up. After that I got married, so I lived with my ex-husband, and he always had some extra person floating around somewhere, guy friend. And then I think I had 2 years I was living alone, and then I started living with my ex-boyfriend. And now I've been living on my own again for 2 years, roughly. Maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And you sit there and you think the house is so quiet. And it feels empty. And it's dim. I always keep the house dim lit because I have sensory issues and I don't like piercing light. Which is nice if you've got candles burning, I have to say. It's very, very nice. But, you know, it was silence and there's no movement around the house. I'm in an apartment, there was no banging or anything, no one was talking. And I was just stuck with my thoughts, and I'm sitting there thinking, see, this is the kind of shit that would drive me into another fucked up relationship, is not being able to cope with the silence of being alone. And we busy ourselves. I started busying myself working on my projects and my businesses, and again, in a sense, it was just like a band-aid solution. It didn't really fix the problem that I may be a little bit lonely. But then I started analysing, why do I feel lonely? And what would the alternative have been? If I'd gone out with someone, if I'd gone back to an ex, it's like it would have been the same shitty treatment. If I moved out with my friends, it's like I've not really got anything in common with my friends anymore. We're still friends, but there's nothing really, you know, that could trigger any kind of strong connection where we want to spend time with each other all the time and stuff like that. My siblings are all off doing their own little life adventures. If I had a housemate, they'd probably drive me fucking nuts. And it's such a small apartment as well. There's just no room for other people to get in there. I've got a 1-bedroom apartment. I've got a massive balcony for some fucking reason. I don't know. I don't even use it. But it's a rental. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But the choices I make in life and my lifestyle aren't, you know, they're not shaped towards social events. I don't go and sit in pubs and things. I wouldn't do it in my free time because I find it's boring and a waste of time. So I do lead a bit of a sedimentary, solitary life. And that's the payoff is, like, I have no kids to raise. I have no boyfriend to constantly worry about or husband to worry about that they're fucking me around. My house is clean all the time. It's, you know, it's you got to pick and choose your payoffs, essentially. You might feel a bit lonely, but at the same time, it's like you ain't got anyone cheating on you. That's one of the main ones for me. You know, I've had 3 boyfriends / husbands in a row that have cheated on me. I'm sitting there going, what the fuck, dude? It's like, is this all the guys ever do? It's like, is this all they ever want? Is to fuck other women around, you know? It's like, what is wrong with these people? Something really wrong with these people. I don't get it. Yeah, it's mental. I don't understand it. And if they blame their male urges one more time, I'm going to throw up on them because it's ridiculous. If women can control their urges, I'm sure men can control theirs. It's just the way we're designed. That was my ex-boyfriend's excuse. It's just the way men are designed. We're just designed that way. It's like, that is the biggest load of shit I've ever heard. And it would come from a cheating bastard like you. You know, it's just, it doesn't make sense. It's like you're only trying to justify you treating other people like shit. So it's just the way we're wired. It's not. You are wired that way because you have intense insecurities, which you use sex as a band-aid solution to fix, or at least to cover up. You know, it's like, it doesn't make sense. I find it ridiculous that they try and push that shit on us. And whether we should just accept that that's okay and that's how it will be. It's like, no. Because my brother's not like that. He is not that way inclined at all. And it's called having human decency, you piece of shit. But they'll sit on that. It's like, oh, that's just the way we are. It's not, actually. It really is not. The majority of men are not like that. The only people that are like that are fucked in the head. More fucked in the head than the people that they prey on. It's just, I can't believe it. But why do we bother? So it gives you a chance to internalize your ideas. Introspection is always valuable. There's no point, just winging it. Otherwise, you'll find yourself lost, I think. I've always been like a planner. I always want to know where things are coming from. That could be a trauma response in itself, right? Overthinking definitely is a trauma response. I can tell you that for a fact, because I want to know where the next punch is coming from. So if you've been introduced to any kind of self-analysis where you can try and pinpoint where your trauma is coming from, what your triggers are, then it's always useful, because you'll know how to cope with whatever's coming. And you can diversify your solutions to that. You don't have to use band-aid solutions, that quick fix to make you feel better. You can try and figure out how you can adapt to this better, or change the circumstances in which you find yourself. That knee-jerk reaction to try and cover it up to make the pain go away is just, it's not going to work. It's not long-term, it's not sustainable. It just spirals into worse things, to be honest, because one band-aid starts a whole snowball of other band-aids that you're just going to have to try and fix. For example, if you have a horrible breakup and you go drinking with your mates to make yourself feel better and sleeping around, now you're running the risk of, venereal disease and alcoholism. So you've got to find band-aids for the band-aids, and then you've got to find band-aids for those band-aids, right? And it just snowballs. You become drug dependent, or an alcoholic, sex dependent, addict. It's building up addictions, because the core problem is that you felt rejected and your ego was smashed for a bit and your self-esteem took a blow. But instead of deal with that and create some kind of safe zone on the inside of you for internal validation, find value in yourself by working on your life, adding value to yourself, you decided to quick fix it with a shitload of booze and sleeping around and hoping someone else will say that you're still okay, even though on the inside you haven't fixed anything and you're still a drunk. It doesn't fix anything, these band-aid solutions, because now you're drunk and you got the clap. So it's like, it's absurd. It doesn't fix it. It compounds it, if anything, it makes it worse. But people don't want to take the time to stop and look at the problems. It's too much like effort. Maybe they're lazy, maybe they're busy. We've all done it before. It's like half the time, people are on the run just trying to get shit done in survival mode. So the quick fix is essentially just patching up and running on. And we all do it. And you never really heal fully. Some people assume that you can heal fully. It's like, no, you're going to live with scars. Scars happen. That's part of living. What can you do with these scars? Can you pass on the information to help other people avoid getting those scars would be great. If they listen. Sometimes they don't listen. Actually, the majority of the reason they don't listen, which is why they live the same fucking cyclic traumas that you did. So they don't want to listen. But, there's always the hope that one of them will say, hey, that's a good idea. I'm not going to do that because, that happened and now you're fucked in the head and I don't want to be fucked in the head, so I'm just not gonna, There is that hope that someone will actually fucking listen. And maybe you shouldn't go out drinking to compensate for your girlfriend breaking up with you. Maybe instead you should A, get a job, B, go to the gym, C, start a business, upskill, something constructive that doesn't involve breaking your body further. It's an idea, a logical one, but people don't like using logic when they've had their feelings and ego hurt. They sit on their emotions. As much as they might claim to be stoic, they sit on their emotions. I didn't do that when I got divorced. I went full logic. I'm like, I don't understand why this is happening, but I'll be fucked if I let that asshole win. That's me being angry. I don't know if that counts as being petty as well, but I was adamant that asshole was not going to drag me down just because he's a loser. And I started going to the gym, and I started working on my finances and working to get myself out of debt and stuff like that. I went on holiday, I upgraded my look, I did everything. I worked on me, and I turned all that love and affection I'd been giving him for 16 years on me. And that's how you end up slightly arrogant, but better for it, and definitely more independent, because I was entirely codependent on him, and whatever he said goes, or went, to the extent where I had no sense of identity or worth. And when he left, he took what little I had with him and gave himself to someone else. So, fuck him. Band-Aid solutions. So, I'm going to have to leave it there, I think. I'm hoping that, you know, some people who might be listening to this might have the balls to start looking at what's going on with their lives, if they're unhappy, if they've developed some kind of addiction or bad habits with regards to, you know, trauma or horrible experiences that they've had, rather than just pick up another bottle or another girl or, you know, another joint. I'm hoping you're actually going to look at the problem that you've got and try and find a way to fix it, rather than just covering it up and hoping it goes away. Because the only thing that happens with that is it will fester and it will become 10 times worse, and you're going to hate yourself in the long term for it, because it will become detrimental to your life. I'm hoping you guys have a fantastic Monday for the rest of Monday. I'm going to go and eat something because I got the gym tonight, and hopefully I can actually lift some weights. Okay, I'll see you later.